It is September 3rd. We're all recovering from our Labor Day holiday. And this is the Finance and Administration Committee. First on the agenda is public comment. If you have a public comment, please approach the podium. You have 3 minutes to speak and announce where you vote and your name.
My name's David Barnoski and I vote in Port Sheldon Township. I forgot we had meetings this morning. And I turned on the YouTube and I was watching and there they are. Oh, shoot, I should have watched sooner. And at the end of the meeting, someone turned off the sound while Roger was still speaking. I wish they hadn't done that. He had said the meeting was adjourned, but he kept speaking. So I wish they would continue. Then I went back to look at the beginning of the meeting and the meeting didn't start until the veterans advisor, whatever was here and they were already speaking to the chair or one of Commissioner Kleingen's over there. So some part of the beginning of the meeting was also lopped off. I wish that wouldn't have happened either. So if we could have confidence in that the professional staff would show the whole meeting, I would prefer that. I would have stayed home. Since I'm here, after the last time I gave, and their signs are not quite correct, but Commissioner Wenzel, after I gave her a hard time about her issues of voting irregularities, she spoke to me in private out in the hallway here and told me some story about what she'd done. So she'd try to present evidence to Justin Roebuck. And I'd just like to say, I don't believe her and I don't care to hear reasons why she has not brought forward her evidence. I would like to say, put it here in public for everyone to see, or it doesn't count. If it's not in public for everyone to see, you don't have evidence, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. Is there anyone else for public comment? Good morning.
Morning. Bob Spayman, Blendon Township. I was particularly angry about the $188,000 that the county has to pay in attorney fees in the Hambly lawsuit on top of the $172,000 the county paid in legal fees to the Callahan Group. That is $360,000 and maybe more, plus lost production and employee grief. A total waste of every taxpayer's money. Shame on you, Joe, and all your sheep known as the Ottawa Impact. There is a reason for the cancellation of last week's meeting, that being the announcement of the settlement on Tuesday. In England, the perpetrators of a shameful and costly act resign and a new official is called. In Japan, they do something a little more drastic. In my opinion, it is you and your sheep should immediately resign from this position. But you are too bullheaded in that. Any future lawsuits are on your head, Joe. I wish there was a way to put the cost on Joe, your sheep, and your pack. Something I would look into if I was the interim city administrator, but Anderson will not do that. It is definitely malfeasance. In the 25 budget, there is a few red flags, but I want to focus in on two that I mentioned at the well-conducted, Joe, meeting last Friday. First being the issue of the number of days in fund balance to pay the bills. It is down to 81 days now from 94 days just 2 years ago. Rating agencies look for about a 90-day or more. That would be a major concern to Anderson if he was here, if he knows what it is. But he appears to be not concerned with that as he proposed a budget, a bad trend. The other major issue is the non-approval of the many positions in the FY25 budget. I counted at least 30 positions while others counted 45. In any case, these positions are along with maybe 15 to 20 positions next year will be addressed at some time. I believe you noticed that the county is rapidly growing and you are just kicking those two cans down the road. I particularly, I don't have any answers to these two questions. The $2.3 million deficit is also an issue, and that would be FY '26 planning is done now. Plus a significant deficiency in international controls at the last audit. Has that been corrected, Mr. Anderson? Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as
So moved.
presented? Thank you.
Support.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Same sign. Motion passes. Next are the consent resolutions. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the August 8th, 2024 Finance Administration Committee meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Next on the agenda is the statement of review under agenda and action requests. Do I have a motion to approve the statement of review?
So moved.
Second.
Is there discussion? Seeing none. And it's got numbers. We'll do a roll call vote.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Wenzel, Ms. Cosby.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. Action item number 2 is accounts payable for July 22nd, 2024 through August 23rd, 2024. The suggested motion to approve general claims in the amount of $23,094,521.90 as presented by the summary report for July 22nd, 2024 through August 23rd, 2024. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Is there discussion? Seeing none, we'll go to a roll call vote.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Wenzel,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. Action item number 3 is Dew Point Professional Services. The suggested motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners a contract with Dew Point Professional Services for IT staff augmentation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And discussion. Paul, would you like to come forward? Good morning.
Morning. So this continues our IT augmentation. You put out, working with purchasing, we put out an RFP.
Thank
You
you.
gotta remind me. Huh?
Yeah, no.
Okay. We put out an RFP, got 49 responses. So a lot of responses. And we landed back on Dew Point as the best vendor for our needs.
I'm sorry. They have the best, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
The best vendor for our needs. So we
Best vendor for your needs.
we were
Okay.
looking for something that was local
Okay.
and wasn't just a staffing service, but actually offered IT professionals.
And will this contract be replacing jobs at all? Or
No, it's
the
really just a
filling?
continuation of what we've been doing for the last few
Okay.
years.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Belknap?
Good morning, Paul. Just a statement of, I guess, IT in the, as organizations continue to further develop IT skills and everything, it seems like a lot of IT stuff is kind of like a temporary project and then you move on. And so just curious about the nature of the industry and in terms of government, because I'm familiar with this, with the state of Michigan, that this is very much routine and, it just seems like we're going to see this even at the local levels at some point, just because of the nature of technology. I didn't know if you had any comments on.
Sure. I mean, the IT is very competitive. The idea of staffing in an organization this small, all the skills that you need is very difficult. So augmenting the skills and things that you need, either if it's in case of emergency or even just to have business continuity, and having the ability to extend and or reduce our skill sets, our talent pool, is going to continue, right? I mean, there's a chronic turnover. We don't have in our department a lot of turnover, but you know, our focus is primarily on keeping everything running, working, and not necessarily, you know, doing anything that's cutting edge, because we're all about things that are proven. So yeah, this is very much a norm in the industry.
Mr. Moss?
Yeah, good morning. I noticed there is a provision, I'm sure there has been, where the county could hire people out of the organization. Has that ever happened?
Yes.
Just
Yes,
curious.
I mean, we like this process, because then we could try it before we buy it,
Yep.
so to speak.
Yeah.
But we also like having, like I'm saying, from a business continuity perspective, having the ability to, if we need, something happens, and we need an additional tech for a week or two, we have the mechanism to proceed down that path. So, yeah, I mean, there's a couple of other reasons, you know, you want to do this. Retention is a big deal. The growth path for people that are under these IT professional services is probably better than the professional growth path working in the county. Recruitment, right? These professional services actively recruit for the talent. We tend to follow a process of posting a job and then hoping somebody wants that job. And that takes time. So this is all really a business continuity thing. For me.
Understood.
So just for point of clarity, because yeah, retention and recruitment are very, very important. How often do we hire out from Dew Point? Or do we hire?
I think
from
we
Dew
hired
Point?
one so far.
Okay. And do we provide training then for that person, or they come in and they're
No,
fully
they-
trained and they support?
They come in trained and certified.
Okay. It's just, there's cost associated with the training process
Oh,
too. So I
absolutely.
just wanted to be clear about that. All right. Any further questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Paul. Great. So the motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners a contract with Dew Point Professional Services for IT staff augmentation. We'll go to a roll call vote.
Mrs. Wenzel,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is number 4, full faith and credit pledge for drain note. Suggested motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners a resolution pledging the county's full faith and credit to a drain note. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
And discussion. Joe here.
He's here.
Any discussion? Or you want?
Full faith and credit.
Full
What
faith
about
and
like
credit?
Half faith and credit.
Yeah.
Let Joe cover the other half.
All right. Okay.
I didn't have
I
any
don't know.
questions, no.
It's routine.
Although I love hearing what the projects are.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Board.
Morning.
Yeah, this is a project up in Grand Haven Township. It's a kind of an overview of, or redo of some storm sewer in the road. And it's an outlet for people who had flooding up in a subdivision.
Hmm.
And this is what this Grand Oaks #3 project is. So it's been in the works for a couple of years. We're at the point of financing. And again, we go through Dickinson and Wright, which the county does as well, but we use the same firm for finance counsel. And I just need the full faith and credit to get the borrowing.
All right.
Pretty cool project, by the way. I'm happy to take anybody up there, and they're actually starting this week. So they're ripping the road up and laying in some new pipe, and
Cool.
it's a great project.
Wonderful.
Any further questions for me?
Looking side to side.
Nope.
Chairman.
Homeowners are pretty excited.
Yeah.
They are actually.
Okay.
We've been up there many times in the field. There is a special assessment, but you know, they know that it's for the right reason.
Yeah.
And it's going to solve a major problem that they've been having for probably 25 years, 30 years. It all started in 2020 when the water table came up and we had all rain. Basements, the elevations of basements were kind of the same elevation as a retention pond that was approved way before my time. but this is a solution. And working with Grand Haven Township, they're a great partner in this. They're actually paying nearly 50, I think they're 49% of the cost.
It's a shared expense.
Yep. And the road commission and the county as well, but primarily the biggest shareholder of it's the township, Grand Haven Township. They're a great partner.
Oh.
Again, I'm happy to take anybody up there. I know it's not too far from you, Raj. It's a good project.
Yeah, flooding can be quite costly. So
Mhm.
I'm sure
We're
that
happy to get this one done.
constituents are happy about it.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Further
time this
questions?
morning.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. And so the suggested motion is full faith and credit for the drain note to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners a resolution pledging the county's full faith and credit to the drain note. We'll go to a roll call vote.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mrs. Wenzel,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, and action item number 5 is the fiscal year 2024 budget adjustments. Suggested motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners the FY 2024 budget adjustments per the attached schedule. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Their discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and go to a roll call vote.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mrs. Wenzel,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. All right, we've moved through the action items. Next on the agenda is discussion item, Crockery Lake, and we have Dr. Jennifer Jones here today to present. Good
Good
morning.
morning, Board of Commissioners. So thankful to be here. I have been working with the Crockery Lake Association now for quite a number of years, and it's a highly impaired lake. Hypereutrophic, which means super nutrient enriched. The bottom phosphorus concentrations recently monitored were about 710 micrograms per liter, and the eutrophic threshold is 25 micrograms per liter, so very nutrient enriched. One of the things that I prepared is a flow path model showing the drains and the tributaries that are going into Crockery Lake. And it's pretty extensive. They pass a lot of farmlands. So we're in the process right now of doing a revised feasibility study plan for Crockery Lake to manage the watershed, but also take care of the basin needs. Right now, this nutrient enrichment is resulting in a lot of blue-green algal blooms, which are toxic. Residents around the lake are having a hard time with recreation, swimming. It's affecting property values. This is happening all over the county, Lake Meketawa, Spring Lake, a whole bunch of lakes and ponds. But more so, we're concerned about these larger lakes that have a lot of residences on them. So this particular plan, I do expect the budget that would be needed annually to be between $100,000 and $150,000 a year. For such a small lake, that is a big budget. But that's what it's going to take to restore this lake. Our goal is to make it clear again. Obviously, the invasive species program has been quite successful. So that's going to be probably a separate special assessment district. But what we're going to have to do is manage the watershed and at the same time employ hypomagnetic oxygenation to prevent the phosphorus release. And at that point, we would start to see a big increase in water clarity, the harmful algal blooms would disappear, and the nutrient loads like the phosphorus would drop significantly. So that is what we're planning to do. I know this is a discussion item, so I'm sure there's questions.
Commissioner Moss?
Yeah, good morning.
Morning.
I'll just get it started. Hopefully we'll have more questions. It sounds like this is a fairly complicated topic. And for me, it's fairly new. So you had mentioned to clean up this particular lake, you mentioned 150,000 a year. Is that for a certain amount of years, certain number of years, or is it ongoing forever? How about that?
That's a great question. 150,000 would probably cover the first year. The unknown is whether the technology that we would propose to put in for the oxygenation would be on a lease basis or a purchase basis. If it's on a lease basis, it would be the same amount probably over a certain period of time until it's paid off. And then there's maintenance costs with those systems. They are obviously electric, but they're basically, they're like a big unit that's in a self-contained trailer. So they're sound insulated, they're secure, they're locked and tagged, so they're not a hazard to, the public. But 150,000 would be probably the first year. I can see ongoing years, up to 100,000. It doesn't mean that it's going to be that every year.
And to continue running that program to maintain the lake, if you run a program like that for 5 years, does it then reduce the ongoing need for a program like that?
That's
does
one of
that
the things that remains to be seen is, can we reduce those nutrient loads enough to give the visual benefit and the measurable, nutrient benefit to be able to kind of pull back on some years? Or is it going to be a constant every year need? Every lake responds differently. And until we have more data for each year, we wouldn't be able to know that.
You mentioned managing the watershed. Can you explain that?
Yeah, well, it's something that's needed a lot more in our world of lake management. So a lot of the lake management methods that we're seeing out there, alum, things like that, are Band-Aids, right? They address the symptoms, they don't address the causes. The whole idea is to do both. We want something that's going to be more of a short-term, immediate fix, but we also want a long-term fix. And that requires identifying what we call the critical source areas that are outside of the watershed, or within what we call the immediate watershed, which drains into the lake directly, and then proposing mitigation strategies for each of those areas. So that can include things like filters, working with farmers during focus groups and roundtable meetings on various use of friendly, I call them, fertilizers that don't run off as readily. So there's a lot of different BMPs that can be implemented in the watershed to reduce those nutrients coming into those drains that are entering the lake.
We have a small pond in our backyard, and I know it had some pretty significant problems over the years. And there's probably 5 or 6 homeowners on it, so it's small. But they started doing cleanup, and it actually has gone extremely well. But our issue on our pond is that there's no flow. There's no water flow. It's just sitting there and it's fairly stagnant. Is that also related to this issue? Stagnation?
Certainly, stagnant water bodies like canals and bays are much more difficult to treat and manage, right? But a bigger lake, anything that's over 20 acres is considered a decent size. A bigger lake's going to have a lot of fetch, a lot of flow. Crockery Lake, being kind of long, does have a significant fetch to it.
Oh.
So it has a significant amount of water movement. But we have to approach this in phases. We have to reduce what's coming in, and then we have to reduce what's called the legacy phosphorus. So that phosphorus that's at the bottom, they're losing oxygen beyond 10 feet. So 10 feet all the way to the bottom of the lake during, starting at about mid to late May through end of October.
And you can measure that?
Yes. So half of the year anaerobic. And this is the phenomena that we're seeing with the Gulf of Mexico. That's why they call it a dead zone. All 3 of those lakes I mentioned earlier, including Crockery, have dead zones, and it's getting scary.
One more?
Yes, go ahead.
You mentioned this is happening around the county. From my perspective, it's still happening in my backyard because we're still fertilizing our yards, but it's better. So can you speak to why? It probably has been happening for a very long time, right? And so has this particular situation built up to become worse and worse over time?
Yeah, there's a lot of factors. Not being anti-development, all right, for smart development, green development, but development has played a big role, right? We're focused on housing and not necessarily on the environment, and they really need to be married. We're really working hard on that right now. So there's that aspect of it. The other is that farming, the farmers are concerned about yield, right? And they're not as versed, they're not knowledgeable necessarily about how the runoff's affecting these tributaries or drains that are coming into the lakes. So that's another element. There's another global element that we're really watching, and that's the CO2 concentration. As we know that is rising from multiple sources, that is, certain lakes cannot absorb as much CO2 as others. And those that don't or can't absorb it as well, the blue-green algae really exploit that carbon as a growth source. So they don't have to expend energy fixing their own nitrogen for their food source.
like an endless cycle.
Yeah, it is.
Commissioner Wenzel?
Can you explain the process of hypolimnetic oxygenation?
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
Yes.
So what it is it's basically, we've been working with EGLE for quite a few years now, about 15 years on evaluating laminar flow aeration. And that's basically taking aerators and destratifying the whole water column. We found that that has some negative impacts, especially if you have internal loading of phosphorus like Crockery Lake does. The idea would be to oxygenate the bottom without disrupting those overlying layers, without homogenizing the water column. And that particular type of technology does that. So it basically draws the water in from the bottom, oxygenates it, puts it back into the bottom. And because the oxygen is so dense and it's such a fine bubble, it stays in solution at a certain specified concentration at the hypolimnion, which is where you want it because you don't want the phosphorus being released from there. So that is the process. It sounds simple. If you look at the machine, it's just monstrous. A lot of components go to that, but they use this readily on sewage treatment lagoons because they have to get those phosphorus concentrations down from, 4 or 5 milligrams per liter, under a milligram per liter for discharge. So it's very much used in that application. We're starting to cross over into using it for inland lakes.
What happens to the phosphorus?
That's a great question. So it goes from, normally if the oxygen's not there, it goes from a solid form to more of a liquid soluble form. In this case, with the oxygen present, it stays locked in the sediments. So unfortunately, one of the ideal approaches would be if we could mine the phosphorus out of the bottom and put it back on the farm fields where the farmers need it the most, right? Whoever comes up with that technology is going to be a trillionaire. But we're not there yet. So we have to kind of, keep it locked in the sediment.
So can you give me a little history of Crockery Lake? I'm trying to remember if it was a man-made lake or it's spring-fed.
It does have some springs in it, but it's an impoundment, right? So it has an outlet. As a matter of fact, on this map, the outlet would be, I guess you could consider it like the far west side of the lake.
Okay.
And so it does have, and it has the green, yellow, and blue tributaries or drains are all coming into it. So you can see are pretty significant
Fed, yeah.
distances. And it's among those paths that we have all of the potential inputs coming in, but we also have septic tanks. They're not sewered. So one of the other elements that we included in the restoration plan is a mandatory septic maintenance program in the absence of having a sanitary sewer.
And so do you monitor other lakes and measure other lakes?
Oh,
Kind of
many.
Many?
Houghton Lake's the biggest one.
Okay. And so of all the lakes that you're monitoring and measuring, would you say that Crockery would be what on the scale, 0 to 10?
So if I had to say 0 is, the worst and 100 is perfect, Lake Superior perfect, I would say Crockery is probably around 20.
20.
And
And
it's
just
pretty impaired.
So in Houghton Lake, what would you say?
Houghton Lake's
Just-
probably about a 70 or 80.
Thank you. And Commissioner Curran, please.
Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you for working on this. It's important. So you mentioned that this situation has to be addressed in phases, and one of the phases is working with the farmers to educate on better ways that are more eco-friendly to fertilize. So what are some of those ways in which they can fertilize?
So there's certain products on the market. A lot of farmers will use whatever, manure fertilizer, whatever is available for the lowest cost, but there's certain products out there that might cost a little bit more upfront. So you can do, matching grants and things like that, but they keep a lot more of the nutrients in the soil. And they keep it locked into the point where if the nutrients in the soil, it can't run off or it's reduced ability to run off. So there's those products that are available. Those are things that we would discuss with the farmer, as well as maybe increasing the width of the buffer zones along the tributary, grassways and things like that. It is a long process. It is not an overnight fix. This is probably going to take a good 5 to 10 years to get this lake turned around.
Any further questions? Mr. Belknap, Commissioner Belknap.
Just a couple of questions. You mentioned BMP's best management practices. Relating to, things like the fertilizers and things for the, like the residential area. I know you mentioned the septic situation. That was going to be my question too, if there's any influence from, I imagine there's a fair amount of volume of septic around that. It's almost like a complete circle around the lake itself, and wondered if how much of the influence of the problem of the lake is related to septic, and is that, a bigger issue than, the agricultural runoff?
Well, that's a great question. The only way to quantify that would be to do a seepage meter analysis of the groundwater nutrients coming in from the water table, from the septic systems. That's pretty much what I did for my master's thesis at Grand Valley way back in the day. And that is an expensive evaluation to find that out if you wanted to get an actual quantifiable percentage of that nutrient. What we're doing with this program is we're, assuming it's a significant portion, it's not the whole picture, right? But if we go and we manage the watershed and we don't manage the septics, we're not going to see the realized benefit. We have to do both.
And that was kind of my thought as far as which target are we looking at as far as the source problem?
Yeah,
Want to make sure
It's
we.
really both. Because if we look at, on an individual basis, the association's done a phenomenal job at educating the populace around the lake about not using fertilizers themselves or using phosphorus-free and low nitrogen fertilizers. There are a couple other fertilizers that I became recently aware of this summer that don't have either of those components to them. They're more of a soil retention conditioner, and so they allow the nutrients to stay locked in the soil or in the lawn so that they don't run off. And I've really been pushing that with a lot of associations and lake boards.
What are those products?
One's Milorganite,
Mm.
and the other one is, I don't even know the name of the product, but it's called bloomfieldroots.com. And they both are excellent for farmers to use or individuals. You can have them shipped right to your door and have them applied.
Commissioner Moss.
A couple other questions I have. What's the kind of balance between number of homes and agriculture, these sources around the lake? Is it like 50-50? I'm just curious, just trying to visualize, because I'm not up there very often.
So there are, what,
Homes or,
105 homes.
okay,
So pretty significant for, it's about a little bit more than a home per acre
okay.
of the lake, surface area of the lake.
Are there homes all the way around the entire lake?
Not entirely. There are some wetland areas and
Okay.
natural areas around the lake.
Okay. How about the number of septic systems around? Do we have a quantity on that?
Pretty much every home.
Oh, every home.
Yeah.
Okay, so pretty much all the houses. Okay,
And a lot of those are probably pretty antiquated. And that's,
Older
we
neighbor.
find during some of our projects, we'll find 50-gallon drums that were used. It's not good.
oh boy. Yeah, there's been discussion on that internally in the county. If there was a maintenance program, would that be run through, what entity would that be run through? So like a lake association or lake board or something?
Yeah, they currently have a special assessment district through Public Act 188, working with the township. They would have to set up a separate assessment district with the township for this scope,
Okay,
would be my understanding.
yeah. What will happen, what is projected to happen long-term as of today?
Yeah. You mean if we implement, right?
No,
Or no?
if nothing happens.
You weren't.
Nothing happens?
Or if there's minimal, I understand
Status quo.
what it sounds like, right? So what it sounds like is the status quo is there's not a lot of funding for this kind of project. I don't know what's going on with this at the state level or what they're doing. Maybe Joe can speak to that but that there are difficulties surrounding bodies, lakes and bodies of water.
Absolutely. Other states, Minnesota, Indiana, they have share programs. So they have where the state, for example, EGLE would collect a certain fund balance and then, disseminate that to individual associations and boards. We don't have that here. The burden falls solely on the taxpayers, on the riparians, as well as any kind of grants that can be obtained.
Grants are not frequent.
No.
didn't
I mean,
think so.
now they have a couple of $3,000 one-time grants for invasive species control, so that can help for a down payment for, maybe a boat washing station. And then you occasionally can find non-point source grants to use for things like septic and watershed, but those are very few as well.
Okay. So what will happen? What's the projection to happen if the status quo continues the next 20 years?
Well, I think it's very scary. Just recently, Spring Lake not only tested positive again, I mean, it's always had microcystis, which is a toxic algae, but it had an anatoxin that was above the limit that's acceptable. And that's a very powerful toxin. I'm very concerned these toxins keep, rising in these lakes. The blue-green algal blooms are going up. And what's happening over time is when these blooms are dominating these lakes, you're having a die-off of all the vegetation. The vegetation is what produces oxygen for the fish. So now you have a complete collapse of the ecosystem because, your weeds are gone, your fish is gone. Now you have all this toxic algae that we can't even swim in, and heaven forbid our dogs drink from it.
And what effects will these algae have on human beings over time?
Yeah, well, there's multiple toxins that they have detected. There's several toxins. So there's hepatotoxins, neurotoxins, any toxin that can affect the kidney, liver, brain, nervous system. I mean, it's bad. And these toxins are pretty, you can have a small bloom and have a very high toxin, or you can have a very large bloom and have a very low toxin. That's why testing is so critical. And the health departments are getting overwhelmed with this kind of testing. They're having to do it more and more for more lakes. EGLE can only come out and do so many lakes per day, so they're definitely overwhelmed as well. But they are very powerful toxins. People have died from them. Pets have died. I know vets now are carrying pamphlets in their offices, educating the public about this. It is a public health hazard for sure.
We swam in our pond one time. Only one.
You live to tell the tale.
We learned.
Swimmer's itch?
Something, yeah. The kids
Commissioner
weren't
Wenzel.
happy.
Sorry.
Can you
Commissioner
repeat the
Wenzel?
website, Lumafield, what was it?
BloomfieldRoots.com.
Can you, the first part of it?
Um,
Bloomfield?
BloomfieldRoots.com.
Okay, thanks.
What kind of long-term testing or what kind of testing is going on right now? Has it been going on in this particular lake that you know of? What's
So
the
in the
status?
past, the only testing that was done, there is a thing called the Cooperative Lakes Monitoring Program, which is good for volunteers. And it gives you a nice snapshot of whether a lake is healthy or not. It basically measures the surface phosphorus. Now, you can have a surface phosphorus of less than 10 micrograms per liter and say, wow, we have an oligotrophic lake, but then take a bottom concentration and have it be 100, 500, 700, as in their case. Such a high concentration that it's hypereutrophic. So unless you're doing that kind of monitoring of the whole water column in multiple locations, you really don't know the dynamic of what's going on and what's causing these blooms.
Has there been that type of monitoring at Crockery?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, I make sure of that.
Has that been going on for a while?
Yeah, a couple of years now.
Okay.
Well, yeah, the CLMP, yes, yeah.
Okay.
Any further questions of Dr. Jones?
Just for the sake of the public and the meeting, I assume our guests are residents of the lake, and would you mind saying your name just for the sake of the audience?
She spoke with us before.
Greg Slater, I am the treasurer of the Crockery Lake Association.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I guess I'm curious either to hear from Jennifer or from Joe or whoever, kind of what type of work has been going on in the county with our various lakes, just to give us a better understanding, kind of what the overall status is and why this has made it, to the board. I'm glad we can bring awareness to this and talk about it and look at
The lack of funding.
what can be done. But I definitely feel like I would like more context as to what's going on.
I think previously the focus was on weed control and invasives, and that's a, relatively speaking, I mean, that's a Band-Aid solution. It's a very low budget way of managing a lake. When we start talking lake restoration, so getting rid of the sources, addressing the sources, it gets very expensive. And lakes now, I know a lot of lake memberships are wanting to restore their lakes, are wanting to invest more, they're wanting to be partners with municipalities and start making some changes because they see that these systems are just getting worse, and merely going out and killing weeds, that's only making the situation worse when you have blue-green algae. So, yeah.
Well, it looks like you need a long-term strategy too for root cause as well. So it sounds like there is a long-term strategy that's been developed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the smart development, farmers in their yields, and then CO2 rising. So that will take some time. Commissioner Belknap.
Just, this is a crazy question, but I was just curious if like a creation of a wetland to the east side of the lake, if that would have any positive influence on what's happening.
There is a significant wetland already at the east end, that is natural. It would just be a matter of looking to see whether that wetland becomes a source versus a sink during supersaturated events. If we could quantify that, then we'd have a better idea as to whether that wetland was functioning properly.
Anyone else? It's been very interesting.
Guess I'd like to hear from Joe if he has anything to add.
Commissioner Bush.
Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, just a few things. This lake is unique. I sit on the Spring Lake Board, as all you know, with Roger Bergman. And we're getting ready to do an alum treatment because of what she talked about, these blooms. There's different types, different toxins. We're going to do that supposedly in the spring now for the alum treatment. That's Spring Lake. Project Clarity on Lake Mac has, they're self-funded. They went out and fundraised, part of Outdoor Discovery, Project Clarity, with all the people, private funds that everybody through fundraising has put an effort to clean up Lake Macatala. It had other names in the past, but we won't talk those names. But anyway, Spring Lake's a little different. Again, we have a lake board. I know we've tried to get a lake board. When I say we, it's not really me, it's the people. And I can't speak for these two, but they know we tried to, a petition was going to go around and form a lake board up in Crockery Lake. And they didn't have the signatures to do that because you got to have 2/3 of the signatures of property owners who own property on Crockery Lake. So that didn't happen. They went to Mr. Meerman, our state representative Meerman, tried to get some state funding. That well is dry. There is no funding, like she mentioned, for these particular situations. The grants are very hit and miss. You really got to have a plan and figure out what you're going to be funding before you even get a grant, and you got to have a match. So that becomes a problem. The money that their special assessment district right now, I want to say it's $50 or $100 a year for a property owner. Yeah, it's 14,000 for the whole lake, if that gives you an idea. The alum treatment on Spring Lake is in the millions. It's $3+ million for the alum treatment. So different size lake, Spring Lake, Crockery Lake, but gives you an idea of what the cost is. It's not cheap. I'm not saying alum is right for Crockery. It's got different mechanisms going on than Spring Lake, so it's a little different. But that being said, we had a petition a few years back to do some improvements on the drains coming in. And anybody can go back and read the minutes. They're all court reported for the Crockery Lake Consolidation Drain Project. And we got a lot of pushback because you got the lake people and you got people that live around the lake. And that was a battle. And we didn't do a lot of the project because we couldn't get easements. People were not willing to give easements. So they feel like Crockery Lake is there to take their water, and that's it. She's right. There's an outlet, which is a level of elevation that we do monitor that. We got drains coming in. We got drains going. We have a drain going out, one drain. We did improvements on there. Part of the project that we did a few years back was dredging. So we dredged all the outlets into Crockery Lake and hauled the sand away, the spoils. So that was kind of the project. And we did some upstream restoration, some two-stage ditching and some drains, but not all of them because we couldn't get any easements. But again, it's all court reported. You can read them, what the farmers had to say upstream and what the lake owners had to say that who live on the lake. Again, the septic systems is probably another issue for discussion. There's a lot of things happening on Crockery Lake that's unique. The township has stepped up And I think it's 5,000 now. I was at that meeting when they made the motion to help financial situation. I think it's 5,000 per the study. Is that correct? Yeah, towards the study. So there's 5,000. I know Allison's here too. She can speak on maybe a meeting she had with one of the township board members. Because it's a kind of a serious situation. The other unique part of this, it's a public lake. Everybody uses it who lives up there. It's not a private lake, so it's a little different than all the other lakes I deal with. All the other, I say all the other, it's a big word, all. A lot of the other lakes are all private. They don't have a ramp. And the property owners take care of it themselves. They hire PLM or they do the spraying for the invasives, try to control the duckweed or the algae. And so that's kind of where we're at now with Crockery Lake. And then Spring Lake, you know, I told you, highlighted what we're doing there. And then Lake Macatawa, Project Clarity is trying to clean up that lake, it is improving. It's all natural. They're doing a lot of funding upstream in county drains and non-county drains to do different two-stage ditching, BMPs, trying to filter the water, more retention ponds. I think one of the other issues on Commissioner Bill Knapp talked about the wetlands to the east. That's called Little Crockery Lake. And I believe that one is filling in over the years. So that was the filter. And so there is a good sized wetland to the east that we're aware of. We've been monitoring that one, but it is it's doing what it's supposed to do. It is filtering, but it's also filling in. So maybe a wetland restoration project down the road could be a grant opportunity there. Because there is money for wetland restoration, not so much on lake restorations.
Excellent. I don't know if Commissioner Miedema wants to add anything?
I don't know if you had any more questions for me. I can step aside.
Morning. I think Dr. Jones and Joe have done a great job already. I would just add that I've spoken often with Troy Goodnow, who is a trustee on Chester Township's board, as well as he was recently elected to be the supervisor and will be taking that seat shortly. And I would just say that ongoing at Chester, they're continuing to have conversations about how much money they're able to contribute. As you've heard from Joe, they've already contributed a certain amount. And I think they're going to continue having those conversations of what that looks like, whether that they can continue, whether they can up the amount of money that they're coming. I appreciate that Chester's put forth what they feel like they can offer. So I don't think I have a whole lot more. I feel like Dr. Jones here, as well as the two members from the Lake Association and Joe, but appreciate you asking me to come up.
Absolutely. Represent the township. Yeah. Thank you. Mr. Slater.
Question.
Oh, but Mr. Slater would like to.
I think this is really important. Greg Slater, and I live on Crockery Lake, but the Gross Park is the one that is on the lake right now. And I do believe they are checking weekly, bi-weekly now for the lake, at least at the park, for all these blooms and all this E. coli. Yeah.
Oh.
So, and we do keep the residents informed. Last month, or actually last month, we had it on septic tanks and innovative ways to do that, because we know that's an important part of that besides the 4 inlets coming from the farmers' fields. And so that to us is very important to take care of as well. And I think this county at least has something in place that when the homes are sold or the cottages are sold, then they have to take a look at the septic at that point in time, which I think is important. And that's happening more and more. So we're getting a younger group on the lake that are really intense in cleaning up the lake. And we thank Dr. Jones for helping us. So thank you for listening.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
Any
It's a
other
great example of collaboration. That's for certain.
Any other last minute questions?
Being none.
All right, you can contact me anytime.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Thank you very much. Very informative. All right, and last is the committee reports, and we have the treasurer's financial month end update with Cheryl Clark.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
So I provided the report to you for the end of July. If you have any questions about that, I can answer them. I also included with my report the review and outlook remarks by Chair Powell from the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. A long read, but I thought the charts in the back are very interesting and how they are monitoring whether or not to do any rate changes.
Mostly in September, so we're in that.
Right.
Okay. How many rate changes will there be?
Right. There was talk of 2, now there's talk of 3.
Will that be all? We don't-
Right.
Our inflationary period should be interesting.
Right.
Is there anything that you would like to highlight, Cheryl? for Your report?
No, just, you'll notice that we did, if you look at the investment distribution by maturity graph, you'll notice that we do have more in the over 360 days than we have had in the past. We did take the opportunity to purchase some of the longer term investments before the rates took a dip.
Any questions?
It's looking quite healthy.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next up are public comments. If you have a public comment, please come to the podium, state your name and where you vote, and you have 3 minutes.
Hello, I'm Betsy Ludwig. I vote at Chester Township. I live on Crockery Lake. Like I said before, I'm the president of the CLA board. And just to add a couple things to what we've been talking about a little bit. First of all, before I forget, the little Crockery Lake that Joe talked about has been pretty dry for a number of years because not too many years ago, the farmer on 16th Avenue was given permission to redirect the creek that he has going through his property. And when he changed that, the flow of that, we got way more runoff from the farm and it didn't filter through the little Crockery Lake as much. So anyway, now there is water in it. It's not very, you can walk across it. It's not very deep and everything. And in fact, they're looking for our alligator in there right now. But so I wanted to say that. So that has been, that whole thing has changed because of a redirection of the little creek that was coming in there, the tributary. The other thing is that we've been working on trying to get some funding so that we can get all of our riparians on board with this, because most of them, when I first started working on this, maybe four or 5 years ago, to clean up the lake, because we were constantly calling for algae treatments. And so we're dumping all this chemical into the lake, and our fish, we had fish kills where we had hundreds of fish dead. We can't keep, DNR won't come and stock our lake anymore because of the quality of the lake. They refuse. We can buy our fish and put them in, but they won't come and stock it themselves. So I've been working on trying to get some help from the state just to get the testing done. We know that the actual work that we're going to do, we're going to have to try to get the riparians to do the special assessment. And we're going to do that. We'll work on that. But whatever we can get to help keep those costs down for us, on our assessment is what we're seeking, because this is not just our lake and our people that live in this lake. We talked about Grosse Park, and that is one of the most popular parks, I think, in especially the chimney of Ottawa County, and we get a lot of ethnic people there who use that lake. And I want it to be safe for them. It's going to affect our drinking water eventually. So we have to be conscious of that, So cleanup is essential, and we're going to do it, but we really want some help with it. And if we can get money from the monitoring settlement or something to just even pay for our testing so that we know that's consistent. That's really what we'd like to do because we love our lake.
Thank you very much. 4 to 5 years, that's a battle. Definitely. Any further comments? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.